The slave market on Kepler Station reeked of desperation and disinfectant. Alien beings of every shape and size huddled in energy cages, their eyes reflecting the cold blue light of the auction floor. Among them sat Zara, her once magnificent, wings folded tight against her back. The left one bent at an unnatural angle that made her wince with every breath. She was HFY, one of the winged people from the cloud cities of Nimbus Prime. Her feathers had once shimmered with colors that shifted like oil on water, but now they were dull and matted. The wing injury had left her flightless, and on her world, a flightless HFY was worth less than dirt. Her own family had cast her out, unable to bear the shame of having a broken daughter. The auction master, a grotesque Slagarian with too many eyes, slithered between the cages announcing the next lot. Fresh meat from the outer colonies, he wheezed through his translator. Perfect for mining operations or pleasure districts. Zara closed her eyes and tried not to think about what awaited her. She had volunteered for this fate, trading her freedom for the promise of enough credits to afford wing reconstruction surgery. The procedure existed, but only in the core worlds, and only for those with astronomical wealth. A lifetime of slavery might earn enough to buy her wings back, though she would likely die long before seeing freedom again. The crowd of buyers pressed closer to the cages. Most were alien species she recognized from her studies back when she had dreams of becoming a xenobiologist. There were the insectoid hive minds clicking their mandibles as they evaluated potential workers. The silicon-based crystallians hummed in harmonics only they could understand. A few reptilian Drachmore merchants hissed negotiations in their guttural tongue. But then she noticed something unusual. A human stood at the back of the crowd, and he wasn't looking at the merchandise like the others. While every other buyer examined, the slaves like cuts of meat, calculating profit margins and work capacity. This human's expression was different. His brown eyes held something she hadn't seen in months. Compassion. Zara had heard stories about humans, though she had never met one before. They were relative newcomers to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel a few centuries ago. Most species considered them primitive, barely above their own slave stock. Yet something about this one made her take notice. He was tall by human standards, with dark skin and graying hair at his temples. He wore simple clothes that marked him as working class, not the expensive suits of the major slavers. What was a poor human doing at an auction like this? The Slagarian auctioneer reached her cage and activated the display panel. Holographic text appeared showing her species, age, and physical condition. The bent wing was highlighted in red as a defect that lowered her value. Lot 17, the auctioneer announced. Damaged HFY female. Flight capability permanently compromised but still suitable for ground-based labor. Bidding starts at 50 credits. 50 credits. Zara's heart sank. She was worth less than a decent meal in the station's restaurants. The buyers barely glanced at her before moving on to examine more valuable specimens. 50 credits, called out a hive mind representative, its voice a chorus of clicking sounds. For mining operations in the asteroid belt. 60, countered a Drachmore merchant. She can work the kitchens in my restaurants. Zara shuddered. Both fates promised short, brutal lives. The hive mind mining operations were death sentences disguised as employment. The Drachmore restaurant chains were notorious for working their staff until they collapsed. The bidding continued half-heartedly. 70 credits, 80. The price climbed slowly as buyers calculated the minimum they could pay for her labor before she became unprofitable. Then the human stepped forward. 200 credits, he said quietly. The auction floor fell silent. Every head turned toward the human in shock. 200 credits was 4 times the current bid, an absurd amount for damaged merchandise. The Slagarian auctioneer's eyes widened with greed. Did I hear 200 credits from the human buyer? You did, the human confirmed, his voice steady. The other bidders began protesting immediately. The hive mind buzzed angrily about humans not understanding proper slave values. The Drachmore merchant accused him of trying to drive up prices artificially. But the human ignored them all, his gaze fixed on Zara. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair. Hope was dangerous in her situation, but she couldn't help the flutter in her chest as she looked at this strange alien who had just paid far more than she was worth. The auctioneer, delighted with the unexpected windfall, quickly closed the bidding before anyone could object further. Sold to the human buyer for 200 credits. Payment processing now. As the human approached her cage with the station security guards, Zara tried to understand what had just happened. Every other buyer had seen her broken wing and calculated her reduced worth. This human had looked at her and seen something else entirely. The energy cage deactivated with a soft hum, and she stepped out on unsteady legs. The human didn't grab her or chain her like she expected. Instead, he offered her his jacket to cover her tattered clothing. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said in heavily accented but clear galactic standard. "I know you probably don't understand why I bought you, but I promise you're safe now." Zara stared at him, unable to speak. In all her months of captivity, no one had offered her kindness without expecting something in return. She didn't know what this human wanted from her, but for the first time since her world had cast her out, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things might get better. As Marcus led her away from the auction floor, Zara caught sight of her reflection in the polished metal walls. She still looked broken, still flightless, still worthless by every measure that mattered on Nimbus Prime. But something in Marcus Chen's eyes suggested he saw her very differently. The other slaves watched her go with expressions of envy mixed with confusion. None of them understood what had just happened. Neither did she. But as they walked through the station's corridors toward whatever fate awaited her, Zara allowed herself to hope that perhaps being sold to this strange human might be the beginning of something unexpected. Something that might change everything she thought she knew about her own worth. Marcus Chen's ship was nothing like what Zara expected. Instead of the cold, sterile cargo holds where slaves were typically transported, she found herself in what appeared to be a small but comfortable living space. The walls were lined with books, actual paper books which she had only seen in museums. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across furniture that looked designed for comfort, rather than efficiency. "Please sit wherever you're comfortable," Marcus said, gesturing toward a cushioned chair. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" Zara remained standing near the door, her damaged wing pressed against her back. Every instinct screamed that this was a trick. Masters didn't offer refreshments to their property. They didn't use words like please or ask about comfort. "I don't understand," she finally managed to say. "What do you want from me?" Marcus paused in his movement toward what appeared to be a small kitchen area. "Right now, I want to make sure you're fed and rested. Beyond that, we'll figure it out together." "Together?" The word felt foreign on her tongue. "But I'm your slave now. You bought me." "Actually, no." Marcus opened a cabinet and pulled out what looked like legal documents. "These are manumission papers. I'm filing them with the Galactic Trade Commission as soon as we reach the next port. You'll be legally free." Zara's knees buckled and she had to grab the doorframe for support. "That's impossible. The fees alone would cost thousands of credits. Why would you free someone you just bought?" Marcus set the papers on a small table and looked at her with those same compassionate eyes she had noticed at the auction. "Because slavery is wrong. Because no sentient being should be property of another. And because I suspect you never deserved to be in that cage in the first place." For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Zara tried to process what she was hearing, while Marcus busied himself preparing a simple meal. The smell of cooking food made her stomach clench with hunger. When had she last eaten properly? The slave traders had provided minimal nutrition, just enough to keep their merchandise alive. "I still don't understand," she said finally. "Humans are new to galactic society. Your people don't have much influence or wealth. How can you afford to buy slaves just to free them?" Marcus smiled sadly as he handed her a plate of food. "We can't afford not to. You see, my species has some experience with slavery. We did it to ourselves for thousands of years before we finally learned better. When we discovered that slavery still existed in galactic society, many humans felt we had to act." Zara took a tentative bite of the food. It was better than anything she had tasted in months. Simple but nourishing, prepared with care. "But you could have bought someone more valuable. Someone who could work, who could repay your investment." "I'm broken." "You're injured," Marcus corrected gently. "There's a difference. My wing will never heal properly. I can never fly again. On Nimbus Prime, that makes me worthless. Marcus sat across from her, his expression growing serious. Tell me about your world, about what happened to you. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush as if a dam had burst inside her. Zara told him about Nimbus Prime's cloud cities, suspended kilometers above the planet's surface by ancient gravity generators. She described a society where flight was everything, how the winged Avare built, their entire culture around their ability to soar, between the floating islands. She explained how she had been caught in a gravity storm while flying between cities, how the artificial weather system had malfunctioned and sent her tumbling into a maintenance tower. The impact had shattered her left wing in 3 places and damaged the neural connections that controlled her flight muscles. The healers said surgery might restore some function, but it would cost more than my family earned in a decade, she continued, her voice growing bitter. On Nimbus Prime, we don't have social support for the disabled. If you can't fly, you can't contribute to society. You become a burden. So your family sold you? No. Zara's voice dropped to a whisper. I sold myself. I volunteered for the slave ships because it was the only way to earn enough credits for the surgery. The slave contracts promised payment to my family and eventual freedom if I survived long enough to work off my debt. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had told him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge of anger that wasn't directed at her. How long was your contract? 50 years. 50 years. Marcus rubbed his forehead. And the surgery? Available only in the core worlds. Only for the wealthy. Even if I survived the slave labor and earned my freedom, I would be too old for the procedure to work effectively. Marcus stood and walked to his desk, where he activated a holographic display. Star charts appeared in the air, showing trade routes and planetary systems. The surgery you need, wing reconstruction and neural pathway repair. You're right that it's expensive in the core worlds. But there are human medical stations that perform similar procedures for much less. Zara felt her heart skip. Human medicine can repair damaged wings. We specialize in fixing things other species consider hopeless, Marcus said with a slight smile. It comes from being underdogs for so long. We've had to get creative about solving problems with limited resources. He manipulated the star chart, highlighting a route toward human space. There's a medical station called Haven Point about 2 weeks from here. They treat refugees from all over the galaxy regardless of species or ability to pay. I can't pay, Zara said quickly. Even if you free me, I have no credits, no way to earn passage to human space. I'm going there anyway, Marcus replied. My ship needs some maintenance and I have business at Haven Point. You're welcome to travel with me as my guest, not my property. Zara stared at the holographic display showing their potential route. 2 weeks to reach a place where her wings might be repaired. After months of believing she would never fly again, the possibility seemed almost too good to be true. Why are you helping me? She asked. You don't know me. I can't repay you. What do you gain from this? Marcus turned off the display and looked at her directly. My grandmother used to tell me something when I was young. She said that every person has value that goes far beyond what they can do or produce. She said the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats the powerful, but how it treats the powerless. He gestured toward the books lining his walls. I'm a teacher by profession back on Earth. I travel between human colonies, setting up schools and libraries. I've learned that knowledge and hope are the most valuable things you can give someone. And you think I have value beyond my broken wing? I think you have value because you exist, because you think and feel and dream. The fact that you sacrificed yourself to save your family shows courage most beings never display. The fact that you survived months of slavery and still maintain your dignity shows strength that can't be measured. Zara felt tears gathering in her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her like she mattered, like she was more than just damaged goods. If the human doctors can repair my wings, she said slowly. What happens then? Where would I go? Marcus smiled. Anywhere you want. The galaxy is vast and there are always places that need teachers, healers, explorers, or dreamers. Once you're free and whole, the choice will be entirely yours. For the first time since her accident, Zara allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. She pictured herself flying again, but this time not just between the cloud cities of Nimbus Prime. She imagined soaring through alien skies, exploring new worlds, perhaps even helping other beings who had been cast aside by their societies. Thank you, she whispered, the words carrying the weight of hope she had thought lost forever. Marcus nodded and began clearing away the dishes. Get some rest. We leave for Haven Point in the morning. As Zara settled into the small but comfortable sleeping area Marcus had prepared for her, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few hours. This morning she had been worthless property. Tonight she was a free being with hope for the future. And it was all because one human had looked at her and seen not what she lacked, but what she truly was. The journey to Haven Point revealed sides of Marcus Chen that Zara had never expected to find in any being, much less a human. During the long hours of hyperspace travel, she learned that his ship wasn't just a transport vessel. It was a mobile library and school. The cargo hold contained thousands of books, educational materials and teaching supplies destined for human colonies on the frontier. Marcus had spent the last 15 years traveling between newly established settlements, helping communities build their first schools and libraries. He paid for these missions by trading in rare books and artifacts, purchasing slaves when he encountered them, and immediately setting them free. How many have you freed? Zara asked as they sat in the ship's small common area sharing a meal. Marcus paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. I stopped counting after the first 100. It's not about the numbers. Each person deserves freedom regardless of whether they're the first or the 1,000th. But surely you keep some record. For the authorities? I file the manumission papers as required by law, Marcus said carefully. But I don't ask the people I free to stay in touch or report their progress. Freedom means the right to disappear if that's what they choose. Zara noticed the way he avoided discussing details. Some of them don't want to be helped, do they? Marcus nodded slowly. Slavery breaks people in different ways. Some have been property for so long they don't remember how to make choices for themselves. Others are so angry they can't trust anyone, even someone trying to help. A few are so damaged they can't function without structure and direction. What happens to them? We have support networks, human colonies that specialize in helping former slaves adjust to freedom, counselors who understand trauma, work programs that provide structure without exploitation. Marcus met her gaze. But some people never fully recover. That's not their fault, and it doesn't make them less worthy of freedom. The conversation made Zara think about her own situation. She had only been enslaved for a few months, but already she caught herself looking to Marcus for permission before acting. During their first dinner together, she had waited for him to eat before touching her own food. When he offered her access to his library, she had asked 3 times if she was really allowed to read the books. I'm doing it too, aren't I? She said quietly. Looking to you for approval, waiting for orders. It's natural, Marcus assured her. Survival mechanisms develop quickly in dangerous situations. Give yourself time. But Zara was tired of being careful, tired of walking on eggshells. That evening, instead of asking permission, she simply went to Marcus's library and selected a book that caught her interest. It was a collection of human poetry from someone named Maya Angelou. As she read, she discovered words that spoke directly to her experience. Poems about rising above oppression, about finding strength in brokenness, about the caged bird that sings despite its captivity. The book had been well read, with handwritten notes in the margins that she gradually realized were Marcus's own thoughts and reactions. When she found him reading in his quarters later that night, she held up the book. Did you choose this for me to find? Marcus smiled. I arranged my collection so certain books would be easier to find than others. But the choice to read that particular one was entirely yours. The notes in the margins, they're beautiful. You understand her words deeply. Maya Angelou wrote about rising from circumstances that tried to destroy her dignity. Her work speaks to anyone who has had to rebuild themselves after trauma. Marcus closed his own book. I thought her words might resonate with you. They do, but they also make me wonder about you. What trauma shaped you into someone who spends his life freeing slaves? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried old pain. My great-grandmother was born into slavery in America. My grandmother grew up during segregation, when humans with dark skin were treated as second-class citizens. My parents lived through the civil rights movement, fighting for basic equality. He gestured around the ship, at the books and educational materials. I grew up hearing stories about what it's like to be seen as less than human by your own species. When humans reached the stars and discovered that slavery still existed on a galactic scale, many of us felt we had to act. But you're doing this alone. buying slaves one at a time, freeing them individually. Surely there are more efficient ways to fight slavery. There are human organizations working on systemic change, Marcus agreed. They lobby galactic governments, fund anti-slavery enforcement, support legislation. That work is crucial, but it's also slow. In the meantime, beings like you are suffering right now. Today. He pulled up a holographic display showing galactic slavery statistics. The numbers were staggering. Millions of sentient beings held in various forms of bondage across thousands of worlds. I can't save everyone, Marcus continued, but I can save someone. And if enough individuals choose to act, if enough people decide that the being in front of them matters more than the larger system, then maybe we can create change from the ground up. Zara studied the statistics floating in the air between them. The scale is overwhelming. How do you not despair? I focus on what I can control. I can treat you with dignity. I can help you reach medical care. I can ensure that one person who was property yesterday is free today. Marcus gestured toward the poetry book in her hands. Maya Angelou wrote that if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. I can't eliminate galactic slavery, but I can change it for the individuals I encounter. The next morning, Zara woke to find that Marcus had prepared breakfast and left it with a note. Eat when you're ready. Today's choices are entirely yours. She smiled at the simple message. He was teaching her freedom in small increments, helping her rebuild the muscle memory of autonomy. As they continued toward Haven Point, Zara began to understand that her rescue was part of something larger. Marcus showed her letters from other beings he had freed, a Crystallian who now taught mathematics at a human university, a Drachmor who had started a restaurant that employed former slaves, an insectoid who had become a counselor helping other trauma survivors. They all found ways to transform their pain into purpose, Marcus explained as they read through the correspondence. Healing doesn't mean forgetting what happened to you. It means integrating that experience into a new understanding of yourself and your place in the universe. And if my wings can't be fully repaired, if I remain flightless, Marcus closed the letters and looked at her directly. Then you'll find new ways to soar. Flight is only one form of freedom, Zara. There are others. As Haven Point grew larger on their sensors, Zara realized that her journey was just beginning. The slave auction had been the end of one chapter of her life. But meeting Marcus Chen had opened possibilities she never imagined. Regardless of what the human doctors could do for her wings, she was already learning to fly in ways her people had never taught her. She was learning to hope. She was learning to trust. Most importantly, she was learning that her value as a being had nothing to do with her ability to soar through the clouds of Nimbus Prime. The universe was vast, and she was beginning to understand that there were many different ways to navigate it with dignity and purpose. Marcus had shown her that sometimes the greatest flights happened not with wings, but with courage, compassion, and the determination to lift others as you rose. Haven Point beckoned ahead, promising not just medical treatment, but the chance to discover who she might become when she was truly free to choose her own path through the stars. Haven Point defied every expectation Zara had about human space installations. Instead of the crude, utilitarian structures she anticipated from a primitive species, she found herself approaching an elegant medical complex that rivaled anything in the core worlds. The station's bioadaptive architecture seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, its surfaces adjusting to optimize healing environments for different species. "Welcome to Haven Point," came a warm voice over the communication system as their ship docked. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Chen. Dr. Sarah Okafor is ready to examine your friend." Marcus noticed Zara's nervous tension as they prepared to disembark. "Dr. Okafor is the best wing specialist in human space," he assured her. "She's treated dozens of flying species." The docking bay buzzed with activity, but not the chaotic energy Zara expected from a major medical facility. Instead, she observed a carefully orchestrated ballet of beings working together. Humans collaborated seamlessly with aliens of every description. Some she recognized, others completely foreign to her. What struck her most was the absence of hierarchy based on species. A insectoid being wearing doctor's insignia gave instructions to a human nurse, while a crystalline entity consulted with what appeared to be a human engineer. Dr. Sarah Okafor met them at the airlock. She was a tall woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical style, her dark skin marked by the kind of laugh lines that suggested someone who genuinely enjoyed her work. When she greeted Zara, she offered a slight bow in the traditional HFY gesture of respect. "It's an honor to meet you," Dr. Okafor said in fluent HFY. "Marcus told me about your situation. I'd like to examine your wing and discuss your options, but only if you consent." The careful attention to consent surprised Zara. In her experience, with healers on Nimbus Prime, patients were expected to submit to examination without question. "You speak my language?" "I've treated 43 HFY patients over the past decade," Dr. Okafor replied, switching back to Galactic Standard. Learning to communicate properly seemed like basic professional courtesy. The medical examination was unlike anything Zara had experienced. Instead of the painful probing she remembered from Nimbus Prime healers, Dr. Okafor used gentle scans and asked detailed questions about Zara's experience. She explained each procedure before performing it, and stopped immediately when Zara showed discomfort. "The good news is that your bone structure healed remarkably well considering the severity of the initial injury," Dr. Okafor explained, as holographic displays showed cross-sections of Zara's damaged wing. "The bad news is that the neural pathways controlling your flight muscles were severed in 3 locations." Zara felt her heart sink. So the healers on Nimbus Prime were correct. The damage is permanent. The healers on Nimbus Prime were working with outdated techniques, Dr. Okafor corrected gently. "We've developed new approaches to neural pathway reconstruction using bioadaptive stem cell therapy. It's not a simple procedure and recovery will take months, but full flight restoration is possible." The words hit Zara like a physical blow. She had spent so many months accepting her permanent disability that the possibility of true healing felt almost impossible to believe. "What's the cost?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Okafor exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Haven Point operates on different principles than most medical facilities. We don't charge patients who can't pay. Our funding comes from donations, research grants, and the generosity of people like Marcus who support our mission." "I can't accept charity," Zara protested. "I need to pay my own way." "Actually," Dr. Okafor said with a smile, "you can pay us back by helping with other patients. We have several HFY here recovering from various injuries. They would benefit enormously from having someone who understands their culture helping with their rehabilitation." Marcus nodded encouragingly. "Dr. Okafor is offering you a job, not charity. Haven Point employs many former patients as counselors and support staff." Over the next few days, Zara was introduced to the remarkable community that had formed around Haven Point. She met beings from across the galaxy who had arrived as refugees, patients, or former slaves, and who had chosen to stay and contribute to the station's mission. There was Krolix, a reptilian Drakmor who had been a gladiator slave until Marcus freed him 3 years earlier. Now he worked as a physical therapist, using his understanding of forced combat conditioning to help other trauma survivors rebuild their relationship with their bodies. She encountered Saritha, a crystalline being whose harmonic singing voice had made her valuable to entertainers who kept her in gilded captivity. After her liberation, she had become Haven Point's music therapist, using sound healing techniques to help patients process emotional trauma. Most remarkably, she met Captain Jennifer Washington, a human who had served as Haven Point's administrator for over a decade. During their first conversation, Captain Washington revealed that she had also been born into slavery. Not alien slavery, but the human trafficking that still persisted in certain sectors of human space. Dr. Okafor performed reconstructive surgery on me 15 years ago, Captain Washington explained as they toured the station's rehabilitation facilities. "Not physical reconstruction like you need, but psychological. She helped me remember that I was a person, not property. And now you run this place? I help coordinate it. Haven Point is really run by everyone who works here. We make decisions, collectively, share resources equally, and support each other's growth." Captain Washington paused at an observation window overlooking a therapy garden, where dozens of species gathered in small groups. "It's what society looks like when you build it around healing rather than profit." The conversation that changed everything happened on Zara's 5th day at Haven Point. She was helping with the evening meal service when a new patient arrived, a young HFY male, whose wings had been deliberately broken by slavers to prevent escape attempts. His fear and despair reminded her powerfully of her own emotional state just weeks earlier. "I'll never fly again," he whispered to Zara in their native language when she brought him food. "I might as well be dead." Looking at this broken young being, Zara realized how much she had changed since meeting Marcus. "I thought the same thing," she replied gently. "But I've learned that there are many ways to soar." She spent the next several hours talking with the young HFY, sharing her own story and introducing him to other patients who were in various stages of recovery. By the end of the evening, she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a flicker of hope. That night, as she prepared for her own surgery scheduled for the following week, Zara made a decision that surprised even herself. She sought out Dr. Okafor and Captain Washington. "I want to stay," she announced, "not just for recovery but permanently. I want to help build this place to work with other refugees and former slaves." Dr. Okafor smiled. "What about returning to Nimbus Prime once your wings are healed? What about your family?" Zara thought about the cloud cities of her birth, about a society that had cast her out for being damaged. Then she looked around at Haven Point, where her scars were seen as proof of survival rather than evidence of failure. "My family sold me when I couldn't fly," she said slowly. "But here, I found people who value me for who I am, not what I can do. When my wings are healed, I don't want to use them to return to a place that never saw my worth. I want to use them to help build something better." Marcus, who had been quietly listening from the doorway, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "You understand now, don't you? This is what freedom really means." Zara nodded, finally grasping the full scope of what Marcus had given her. He hadn't just freed her from slavery or arranged for her medical care. He had introduced her to a way of living that she never knew existed. A community where value wasn't measured by ability or productivity, but by the simple fact of existence. "Thank you," she said to Marcus, but she was looking around at all of them. Dr. Okafor, Captain Washington, Krolix, Saritha, and the dozens of other beings who had chosen to turn their pain into purpose. "Thank you for showing me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most beautiful flight is the one that lifts others as you rise." As she prepared for surgery the next morning, Zara realized that her transformation was already complete. Whether or not her wings could be repaired, she had already learned to soar in ways her people had never imagined. She had discovered that true strength came not from the ability to fly above others, but from the willingness to help others find their own wings. The surgery lasted 18 hours. Dr. Okafor and her team worked with microscopic precision, rebuilding neural pathways that had been severed, grafting bioadaptive tissues that would integrate with Zara's natural wing structure, and carefully repairing the complex muscle groups that controlled HFY flight. Zara awoke to find Marcus sitting beside her bed, reading one of his beloved books of poetry. When he noticed her stirring, his face broke into a relieved smile. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. Zara tried to move her wing and gasped as she felt sensations she hadn't experienced in over a year. The damaged wing responded to her thoughts, folding and extending with careful movements. It was weak and the muscles trembled with the effort, but the connection was there. "I can feel it," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I can actually feel my wing again." Dr. Okafor entered the recovery room carrying a data pad filled with surgical notes. "The procedure was even more successful than we hoped," she announced. "Your neural pathways are already showing strong integration with the grafted tissues. With proper rehabilitation, you should regain full flight capability within 6 months." But as the initial euphoria of successful surgery faded, Zara found herself facing an unexpected emotional challenge. For months, she had defined herself by her disability. She had built an identity around being the broken HFY, the flightless bird. Now confronted with the reality that she would fly again, she struggled with questions she hadn't anticipated. Who was she if not the damaged one? What would her place be at Haven Point once she was no longer a patient? Would the community that had embraced her brokenness still want her when she was whole? These doubts surfaced during her first rehabilitation session with Krolix. The former gladiator had designed a gentle exercise program to help her rebuild strength in muscles that had atrophied during months of disuse. "You're holding back," Krolix observed as Zara performed a simple wing extension exercise. "Your body is capable of more, but your mind is restraining it." "I'm afraid," Zara admitted. "What if I heal completely and then don't belong here anymore? What if I become like the people from my homeworld who couldn't see past their own abilities?" Krolix set down his datapad and looked at her with understanding that came from his own experience of transformation. "Do you think Dr. Okafor became less valuable as a healer when she recovered from her own trauma? Did Captain Washington lose her ability to help others when she moved beyond being a victim? That's different. They were already helping people. And you're not?" Krolix gestured toward the therapy wing where Zara had been working with new patients every day since her arrival. "The young Avirai who arrived last week calls you his guardian angel." "The Crystallian patient speaks of you as the first person to truly listen to her story. You think your value comes from being broken. But I see someone whose true strength has nothing to do with her wing injury." The breakthrough came 3 weeks into her recovery, during what should have been a routine physical therapy session. Zara was working on complex wing movements when a commotion erupted from the emergency medical bay. A transport ship had arrived carrying refugees from a collapsed mining operation, including a dozen Avirai who had been working in the underground tunnels. Without thinking, Zara abandoned her therapy session and rushed to help. The arriving Avirai were traumatized, malnourished, and several had wing injuries from cave-ins. They spoke only their native language and shrank away from the human medical staff trying to help them. Zara found herself serving as translator, cultural interpreter, and emotional support. She explained medical procedures in terms the refugees could understand, helped them navigate their fear of yet another alien species trying to control them, and most importantly, showed them living proof that Avirai could heal and thrive away from their home world. "You speak to the sky people," one elderly refugee said to her in amazement. "You make them understand the song of our hearts." It was only later, as she reflected on the day's events, that Zara realized what had happened. Her ability to help hadn't diminished as her wing healed. It had expanded. She was becoming a bridge between worlds, someone who could help both humans and Avirai understand each other better. Marcus found her that evening in the station's observation deck, watching the stars through the transparent aluminum panels. "Krolix told me what happened today," he said as he joined her at the railing. "Sounds like you've found your calling." "I keep thinking about what you said when you first freed me," Zara replied. "About my value having nothing to do with my wings. I'm finally beginning to understand what you meant." "What do you understand?" "My worth isn't in my ability to fly or my disability preventing flight. It's in my capacity to connect with others to help them heal, to serve as a bridge between different ways of understanding the world." She flexed her healing wing experimentally. "When I can fly again, I won't be returning to Nimbus Prime to reclaim my old life. I'll be using my wings to reach people in places that need help." Marcus smiled. "Dr. Okafor mentioned that Haven Point has been asked to establish satellite medical stations throughout this sector. They need someone who understands multiple species and can help coordinate care across cultural barriers. A flying ambassador for the healing arts?" "Something like that. Would you be interested?" Zara considered the possibility. Flying between stations, helping establish new communities dedicated to healing and freedom, working to build networks of care that could reach beings who had been written off by their own societies. It was a future she never could have imagined during her darkest days in the slave markets. "There's something I want to do first," she said. "When my wings are fully healed, I want to return to Kepler Station." Marcus looked surprised. "To confront the slavers? To find others like I was. To offer them what you offered me. A chance to discover their true value." Zara's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "I want to buy slaves and free them just like you did for me. I want to show them Haven Point and help them find their own paths to healing. That's dangerous work. The slave markets don't welcome interference, Yor. You've been doing it alone for years. But what if you had a partner who could fly reconnaissance, who could speak to the winged species, who understood what it felt like to be considered worthless?" Zara turned to face Marcus directly. "What if we worked together?" The conversation continued late into the night, planning missions that would combine Marcus's experience with Zara's unique abilities. They talked about establishing networks of freed beings who could help identify and rescue others, They discussed mobile medical units that could provide care in regions where beings like her were considered untreatable. Most importantly, they planned how to spread the philosophy that had transformed both their lives, the radical idea that every sentient being had inherent worth regardless of their capabilities or disabilities. "There's one thing I need to know," Zara said as they prepared to return to their quarters. "When you bought me at that auction, did you already have this in mind? Were you planning to recruit me as a partner?" Marcus shook his head. "I bought you because slavery is wrong and you deserved freedom. Everything else, your healing, your choice to stay here, your desire to help others, those were your decisions. I just provided the opportunity." "And that's what makes you remarkable," Zara replied. "You see potential in beings that everyone else has written off. You offer chances without expecting anything in return." As they walked through Haven Point's corridors, Zara noticed details she had missed during her early days as a patient. The walls were decorated with artwork created by former refugees. The common areas buzzed with conversations in dozens of languages. Children of multiple species played together in ways that would have been impossible in the segregated societies most of them had come from. This was what Marcus had really given her, not just her freedom or her healed wings, but a vision of what the galaxy could become when beings chose to value each other's fundamental worth rather than their surface capabilities. In 6 months, when her wings were fully healed, she would take flight again. But she would be soaring toward a horizon she never could have imagined when she first offered herself for sale. To fix her broken body, she would be flying toward a future where no being would have to choose between their dignity and their survival. And she would not be flying alone. 1 year later, Zara soared through the artificial atmosphere of Kepler Station with the grace and power she had thought lost forever. Her wings, stronger now than they had ever been before her accident, carried her effortlessly through the trading complex's vast central chamber. But she wasn't here as a tourist admiring the architecture. She was here on a mission that would have been impossible to imagine during her darkest days. The slave auction was in full swing when she landed silently on the observation platform overlooking the trading floor. Her enhanced wings, rebuilt with bioadaptive technology, made no sound as she folded them against her back. Below her, the same Slugarian auctioneer wheezed through his sales pitch, while desperate beings cowered in energy cages. Marcus stood in the crowd of buyers, but this time he wasn't alone. 3 other humans accompanied him, members of the Liberation Network that had grown from their partnership. Dr. Okafor waited in their medical transport ship, ready to provide immediate care for any beings they rescued. Captain Washington coordinated with the legal team that would process manumission papers and provide support services. But today's operation was different from Marcus's previous solo efforts. Today they weren't just buying individual slaves, they were gathering evidence for the Galactic Trade Commission's investigation into Kepler Station's illegal trafficking operations. Zara activated the recording device hidden in her clothing and began documenting the auction. Her unique position as someone who could fly gave her access to vantage points that ground-based investigators couldn't reach. She captured footage of the holding areas where slaves were kept, the financial transactions between buyers and sellers, and most importantly, evidence of the torture and abuse used to control the merchandise. Through her earpiece, she heard Marcus's voice as he began bidding on a young crystallian whose harmonic resonance had been surgically altered to make him more valuable as a living musical instrument. "Bidding starts at 300 credits, came the auctioneer's voice. 500, Marcus announced, immediately jumping the price to discourage other bidders. 1,000, countered a Drakmore merchant who recognized Marcus from previous auctions. This was the new challenge they faced. Word had spread through the slave trading community about the human who bought slaves just to free them. Some sellers now deliberately bid against him to drive up prices, knowing he would pay almost anything to rescue someone. Zara smiled as she activated the second phase of their plan. She took flight again, this time allowing herself to be seen by the crowd below. Gasps of amazement rippled through the assembly as beings pointed upward at the Avare soaring overhead. "Look," she called out in a voice enhanced by the same bioadaptive technology that had repaired her wings. "An Avare flies free among the stars. See how she soars without chains, without masters, without fear." The psychological impact was immediate and powerful. Every being in the auction hall could see living proof that freedom was possible. that those who had been broken could be made whole again. Several slaves in their cages began to weep with hope, while buyers and sellers shifted nervously. But Zara wasn't finished. She dove toward the auction platform, landing gracefully beside the crystallian that Marcus was bidding on. "This being's music was meant to bring joy to the universe," she announced, placing a protective hand on the young alien's shoulder. "Not profit to slavers," the auctioneer sputtered in outrage. "Security! Remove this creature from the trading floor!" That was Marcus's cue. He stepped forward with legal documentation that Zara had helped him prepare. "Actually, I'm exercising my right as a registered buyer to examine the merchandise. This HFY is my cultural consultant, helping me assess the value of winged and harmonic species. It was all perfectly legal under the station's own trading regulations, but it had never been done before. The combination of Marcus's legitimate buyer status and Zara's dramatic aerial display created confusion among the station's security forces. During the chaos, other members of their team moved through the crowd, quietly making contact with potential allies. They had learned that many buyers at slave auctions weren't there by choice. Some were agents working to free specific individuals. Others were beings forced into purchasing slaves to satisfy debts or political obligations. Dr. Yithira, a crystallian healer who had once been enslaved herself, approached the harmonic being's original owner. "I represent the Crystallian Resonance Foundation," she said, displaying credentials that Marcus's legal team had helped her obtain. "We're authorized to negotiate for the repatriation of our citizens who have been taken from our world illegally." The beauty of their evolved strategy was its multi-layered approach. While Marcus continued his direct purchases of individual slaves, other team members worked through legal, diplomatic, and cultural channels to challenge the entire system. Zara used her flight advantage to coordinate the operation from above, relaying information between team members and documenting everything for the investigators. When she spotted a group of HFY in one of the holding areas, she made a decision that would have terrified her a year ago. She landed directly in the slaver's compound. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded the compound supervisor, a heavily augmented human whose cybernetic implants suggested a background in military combat. "I am Zara Windsong of Nimbus Prime," she announced, using the formal introduction protocols of her people. "I invoke the right of Cloudkin to speak with my people before their sale." It was an ancient HFY tradition that most species didn't understand, but which carried legal weight in galactic trading law. The supervisor couldn't refuse without risking diplomatic complications with Nimbus Prime. The enslaved HFY stared at her in amazement as she approached their cage. They had probably never seen one of their own kind flying free in galactic space. "Listen carefully," she whispered in their native language. "Help is coming. The humans you will meet are not like other slavers. They free our kind and help us heal. When the auction begins, watch for my signal." But as she spoke with her fellow HFY, Zara noticed something that made her blood run cold. Among the slaves scheduled for auction was a familiar face, Thys, her younger sister from Nimbus Prime. The shock of recognition nearly overwhelmed her. Thys had been the family favorite, the one whose wings shimmered with the most beautiful colors, who had been destined for a high position in the Cloud City's governing council. "What was she doing in a slave market, Zara?" Thys whispered, her voice broken with disbelief. "But you're dead. The family, they said you died in the slave ships. I survived. I was freed and my wings were healed." Zara fought back tears as she saw the despair in her sister's eyes. "What happened to you? How did you end up here?" The story that emerged was devastating. After Zara's departure, their family had fallen into debt, trying to maintain their social position without her labor contribution. When they couldn't pay, creditors had seized this as collateral. Rather than admit their daughter had been sold into slavery, they had told everyone she had died in an accident. "The family honor," Thys said bitterly. "More important than their own children." Zara felt rage building in her chest, but she channeled it into determination. Through her earpiece, she contacted Marcus. "Change of plans. My sister is here. I need to get her out, but I also need to send a message to Nimbus Prime about what their society has become." "What do you have in mind?" Marcus's voice carried understanding and support. "I'm going to buy her myself, in full view of everyone here, and then I'm going to make sure word gets back to our homeworld about what happened." The auction for Thys began an hour later, Zara had taken a position in the buyers section, her presence causing murmurs throughout the assembly. It was unprecedented for a free member of a species to bid on enslaved members of their own kind. Lot 47, the auctioneer announced. Premium Aviary female, excellent coloration, perfect breeding potential. 1,000 credits, Zara called out, her voice carrying across the auction floor. The hall fell silent. Even the auctioneer seemed stunned by the unprecedented situation. 1,500, countered a hive mind representative. 5,000, Zara responded without hesitation. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 5,000 credits was an enormous sum, more than most slaves sold for regardless of species. But Marcus understood what she was doing. She wasn't just buying her sister's freedom. She was making a statement about the value of a virile life that would be impossible to ignore. When word reached Nimbus Prime that a worthless, flightless Aviary had paid premium prices to free her own family member, it would challenge everything their society believed about disability and worth. The bidding ended with Zara's victory. As she approached the platform to claim her sister, she found herself face to face with the same Slugarian auctioneer who had sold her a year earlier. "I remember you," he wheezed through his translator. "You were worthless. Broken wing, 50 credits. "Yes," Zara replied, helping Thys down from the platform. "But I was never the one who was truly broken." As they prepared to leave Kepler Station with their rescued beings, Zara received a communication from an unexpected source. The Governing Council of Nimbus Prime was requesting an audience with her. "They want to offer you a position in the diplomatic corps," the message explained.